And today we're going to get into one of my favorite styles of sessions. This is actually how Product Coffee started. We started back at the beginning of the pandemic when we just couldn't get together in person. And we got on and grabbed a cup of coffee and sat there and chatted with each other and talked about whatever was on our mind, what challenges we had going on, ideas that we wanted to dig deeper on and learn about together. Just had some really great deep product management discussions. So today's session is really all about the questions and topics that you want to talk about. We're going to let you guide the sessions, guide the conversation today. But I would like to suggest that we open up that shared notes document over at productcoffee.com/notes and join us there in the Google Doc. You can save that on your own in your own Google Drive, so that you're able to capture questions, capture your insights. We'll talk about articles and links to books and things like that. Let's try to drop those together in the notes document. As I'm facilitating the conversation, it's hard for me to also take notes. But if we do that together, then we can capture more learning together. You can save it off to your own Google Drive. It'll be there for you forever, or at least as long as Google's there. So let's get started. I just would like to invite everybody to just throughout the morning, as you have an idea or a topic that you'd like to address, just throw your virtual hand up. You can also jump in, but I'll try to get to everybody in order as best I can. And you can find your virtual hand down in the reactions bar at the bottom of Zoom. It just says raise hand. And if you want to jump in and answer a question or speak to something, just once again, do the same thing, throw up that virtual hand or jump into the conversation. You just come off of mute and start engage in the conversation. So does anybody have anything they want to kick off with today that they'd really like to spend some time with this group of smart product people talking about and addressing? I'm not going to leave a big long pause. There we go. Rebecca, bring it on in, Becky.
All right. Yeah, I know I messaged this to you, so I'm actually really excited. I appreciate you having this AMA like perfectly timed. The four of us on the product side have been having endless conversations via strangers on LinkedIn. So it's cool to have this really neat knit hub. So for those who didn't hear earlier when I introduced myself, I'm at a startup. We are kind of really hyper focused on product and merging structured and non-structured data for product leaders, product owners, product management. A lot of what we've discovered over the past 2 years of finding our value and finding our moat is that product people are the glue. Not one of you does the exact same thing. Not one of you does the exact same thing every day. And so what's exciting for us is that we've found a way to create this merge of this data that hasn't previously been able to be merged, and especially with the boom of AI and our machine learning, we can allow you to ask questions that matter to you, right? So for an example, you can understand your top users, or you could understand how a release went last week, right? Are there any bugs from it? How many, if there are bugs, how many people were affected? Just kind of merging all of your data to one centralized source. And then also kind of bringing visibility to data for those who may not feel comfortable with the data tools you have today, may not feel comfortable with SQL. So I'd love to learn, what are the questions that you all would like to have asked if you had a tool in your hands that unified your data?
I'm going to let some other folks jump in here before I do. Or not. If I'm trying to unify my structured and unstructured data, one of the things that for me I'm trying to do is I'm trying to build a deeper understanding of the full 360 degrees of what's going on. So the types of questions that let me think about this a little bit. The types of questions that I'm generally looking for are making meaning out of the unstructured data, is I think where my head's going first. Because that unstructured, I've worked a big chunk of my career in marketing technology, and marketers are pack rats when it comes to data. They want to capture every bit of information they can. They want to hang on to it, and they want to onto it for as long as they had. And I was out, God, it was a couple of years ago. I was out at Patty. I don't know if you remember, if any of you are scuba divers, but they were a client that I was working with, and they were talking about, yeah, we have got so much data that we have gathered over the years about our members, about the people that we've certified, about our customers, and we have no idea what to even do with it. So and that includes structured data and unstructured data. From our perspective, we were looking at things like, you think about the profiles that you have and the explicit data that you have that would go in a relational database table. But then we also had a bunch of behavioral data and a bunch of activity data that was much less structured, and trying to make meaning out of all the actions that somebody is taking and doing. Sometimes you don't even know where to start looking. So I think if I think about how I even use something like ChatGPT, I'll throw a bunch of data at it and say, what are some interesting things that I'm noticing here that just might help me start observing some patterns and exploring a little bit, just to start discovering what's possible with the data. So what's possible with this data? What information is here is I think the first thing when I think of that volume of data is, what kind of information do I even have at my disposal, is one of the first things I want to know. Diane?
Yeah, that also made me think, just, really understanding and trying to categorize the data, how it relates to each other, right? We've got certain pieces that are going to offer certain things. So is there a relationship between certain parts of the data? And can you kind of group that in a way to then understand what would be potential outcomes of having this set of data versus that set of data? As one of the things that comes to my mind is finding ways to how would you categorize it?
Can I also add a question about timing in there as well? So I feel like one of our struggles is feedback loops, like, we release. So I'm getting some information right after a release, but what our struggle is being pulled away 6 months down the road, a year down the road, and following up and making sure our tools are as effective, the things that we're releasing. So I want to make sure that, yes, everything that you're saying, but then also we're coming back to it and being able to understand the timing and how it changes over that time.
I love that. That's feedback I've also heard, because one of the things, right, is go-to-market strategy. And while that's the most exciting thing I've heard from 3 people so far in the past week, is just making sure 6 months from now what we did was working. It's like, how can I sell you on something that's going to be valuable in 6 months? But I love that your heads are there. It's really insightful too.
Yep.
Thank you.
How about you, Mike?
I think from my side, Rebecca, I think one thing I'd be curious about is just, you talked about some high level segmentations, because I'm hopping between product manager, product strategy, product owner in various organizations, and it's a different uniform. And I think you want to deep dive, like I said, in terms of team performance on the product owner side versus what's happening in the industry, kind of areas. And so I think that's important to really identify those islands or those communities, things to help people organize where they're going about. Because it's like, we all know there's a tremendous set of resources in what's the best way to implement Marty Kagan or Teresa Torres or things like that. Those are other key resources out there that kind of guiding someone through those identifications, and then seeing some of the outcomes that happen from those.
Outcome focus is something that you just said that I just kind of picked up on there, Mike, as well. Is I think one of the hardest things that I've struggled with, maybe not one of the, product management's hard. There's lots of hard things. one of the things that I've struggled with lots of times over my career is finding and getting access to the data that really can give me both headlights and confirmation of the outcomes that I'm headed towards. What data do I have and what data do I not have that would help me understand if I'm moving in the right direction towards delivering on the customer outcome that I'm wanting. And there might be some I think getting creative about your leading indicators and finding leading indicators of success in the data is a particularly hard thing, because it takes a great deal of data science work to actually go in and mine everything that you have to understand what really is predictive and what is just a correlation or random chance. So finding leading indicators in data is an interesting question that I would be kind of exploring.
I think, Jason, from my side too, it's when people simplify A/B testing, they're looking for an outcome, but are they really measuring the right thing, the right impact, the right, changing colors, changing size of fonts? I'm pragmatic. Are those things going to sway me? Probably not.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Jason, I was just thinking back to Misha's workshop last week.
Yep.
And I'm almost wondering, like, can you take the data and information you've learned from your customer interviews and prompt it, say, hey, you're a product director or you're a product manager. Here are your outcomes. Here is largely, what you're trying to achieve. Here is, the roadmap, or at least, some form of a plan. And does it seem like these two are one for one? Does it seem like you're headed in that direction or aligned? Will you achieve your outcomes? Just start prompting it with various different questions to see what it comes back with from all that information. But you almost have to coach it on what you have and what it is that you're trying to learn from the information that's there.
Cool. Yeah, it's an interesting, I would say, more predictive versus discovery within the data that you have, more looking to the future, which is a cool story we could tell. Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, you bet. You bet. So anybody else have a topic that they want to hit on? If not, I have some questions, but I want to make sure that we're focusing on those who were here first. But and I think it's kind of related. I had two actually come up that are related to. Excuse me. I had two kind of come up that were related to what you're talking about, Rebecca, and one of them was specifically around A/B testing. I want to come back to that, but we also had quite a few people digging in and interested in finding the balance between new product development and supporting legacy products. And some of the specific questions that I got were, I'm in a role right now where my primary responsibility is to lead development of a next generation platform, but it's not practical to fully replace in a short period of time our existing platform. At the same time, but we need to move forward on that while continuing to support our existing customers. And I saw Andy's hand go right up on that. So I'm definitely you kind of see where I'm going. Is there's some best practices that, and some experiences that people have had in balancing those things. And I'd love people to talk about how they've balanced that, managing a legacy platform while really trying to drive forward with new product development, next generation platforms or next generation products to address either an existing market in a better, newer, more modern way, or maybe even attack a new market. So Andy, your hand went right. Andy Pohl, let's start with you since we've got two Andys with the hands up. Yeah.
Yeah, appreciate that. Yeah, I've lived that in a previous role at a large banking software company, and we fought that. My manager, who's the director, and I fought that battle for years and years. And honestly, despite, and some things were funding related to large company, lots of different areas to fund. Ours wasn't terribly. It was not a profit center. It was more of a necessity for our clients, compliance kind of software, anti-money laundering software, things like that. So we never could compete as well with the fat, flashy apps and things like that. But anyway, we actually came to the conclusion as a company, and this worked out well for us, honestly. We actually separated out the product management role into a new development kind of product role and maintenance day-to-day product role. And honestly, that worked out the best for us because we never could keep those fires tapped down enough to fully give the new initiatives the kind of attention they deserve. But when the role was separated, and we were partners, I actually got to be in both roles, or not at the same time, but both those roles at two different times in my career. And it was refreshing to be able to focus on just the new things, partnerships, new data streams, new revenue ideas, things like that. So that was my experience and that may not work for everyone to separate it out, but that's what we did. So, yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. One of the questions that I'm curious about when you did that, did you experience any kind of challenge with the team that is focused on maintaining the existing versus the team that's focused, or the part of the organization that's focused on the new? Not everybody gets to work on the new fun stuff. How did you manage to that? What kind of challenges did that separation create that had to be managed to?
Well, we were kind of in a unique situation where our development team, our day-to-day development team, really stayed on the day-to-day work. They did some advising on the new pieces in a focused way, but we were going down the road of a partnership to replace the older legacy product. So it wasn't quite who's going to get to build the new thing. It was more
Right.
It was more like, you guys are going to maintain this and give us some advice on data structure and architecture, things like that. And we're going to go over here and partner and just have more like data architects work on the new stuff. But I did have some dedicated people that were architecture level people and data people that were pretty much dedicated to the new piece only for the most part.
Gotcha.
So
Gotcha. Cool. Andy Bowden, Andy number 2.
Yeah. Thanks. So one caveat is it depends on how large an organization and product team you have. If you have a large team, and I've had a similar experience in a role where I focused on new technology. I got to look behind the scenes of our suppliers' roadmaps. It got one example. I saw 4K TVs in 2005, 10 years before they came out. But big organization like the group I have now, there's no way I could divvy up maintaining the current product and trying to build a new one. I need to supplement my team. That's kind of one thing. The other thing is that I don't know where you were going. I thought you were going this way, Jason, but if you're in a role of looking out and you're one of the only one or one of the few that's looking at the new technology and where should you go, and the organization, if you work for any public company, you got to make the quarter and you got to live by that. And that distracts management. And then you may be put in a position that may not be good for you to keep doing what you're doing. And then there's the element I think of it as it's just like if you've got an issue of how do I balance my sprints? How much do I keep in reserve for bug fixes or tech debt versus having to stop completely and then go forward. And so you have all that going back and forth on the legacy product. I just think that, you know, you got to have a good balance. And ultimately, one of the things I found that we were successful of when it came to legacy product is put in a date, even if it's just a date to put a stake down, but you've got to plan for its death. And it's better for you to do that than somebody else competition, right? And that may be more true if you're working with tech hardware, right? Where there's end of life and there's other things versus in the software world. But you know, if you don't plan the sunset of a legacy product, or if there is one, and the new product is to take its place or whatever along those same lines, it's better that you plan that. And a lot of people don't plan that. They go, hey, we need a new product, which is what all the effort gets into, but nobody thinks about what do we do with the legacy product when the new product's up and running, and what do you do with it? We just stop it? How do you take care of customers? I mean, there's a ton of questions when it comes to that, but my main thing to leave it with you all is it's better to plan its end of life, obsolescence, death, if you will, than let someone else do it.
Absolutely. Or to just have it happen without a plan, without it being
right,
planned.
Right.
That's great. Thank you, Andy. Greg.
Yeah, my experience tracks a lot with what Andy was talking about. I think one of the things that you really have to be careful about is one, you know, if you're going the route of completely building a new product to replace a legacy product, or going through replatforming exercise, something like that, is one, be honest upfront about how long that's going to take and what kind of resources you need to accomplish it. You know, there's going to be unknowns, obviously, but having a sense early on of what that effort entails is and how long it's going to take is very important. And knowing whether or not the size of your team in its current state can accomplish it while still maintaining the legacy product. So I would definitely recommend expanding teams, you know, dedicating people to the legacy product as well as people to the new effort. And three, or I think this is the third point I was going to make, is plan for that transition of existing customers from the very beginning. Don't get, you know, 2, 3, 4 years into this project before asking the question, how are we going to get all of our legacy customers onto the new product without interrupting their operations? And that's especially important in a B2B context where their business operations could depend on, you know, could come to a halt if if you're not updating them in a easy enough manner. And also realize that if you make the upgrade process onerous on them, they're going to put it off as long as possible, potentially to the point where it becomes a liability for them and for you, and also just kind of it kind of puts as many barriers as you put in the way of them getting onto the new platform. If you can remove those at all possible, that's the way to go.
Yeah, and not just yes, and that making sure that you're not making that transition onerous and difficult is huge, because they're already dealing with a level of fear of change before you, even if you make it an invisible change where they literally have to do nothing to start using the new platform, there's still that fear of change. So if you can at least get yourself in a position to only focus on the fear of change and not focus on the migration and how difficult it is to do so, that puts you in a better position to win on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially if it's I guess an additional thing on that is that if there are a lot of noticeable changes, there's always that comparison of in their mind of, well, we used to do things this way and now we have to change the way we do things. And it's that's natural. It's part of things. If you weren't making any changes, there'd be no point in making something new in the first place. But you are going to have to manage their expectations around it.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Greg. Diane, I know you've been through this ringer a time or two yourself. So share some of your perspective, please.
Yeah, so I have been 3 iterations of reporting, how many, right? And yeah, I'll just say, sort of adding on, really targeting customers that can be your champions, right? Finding that balance is making sure that this new thing is going to solve the problems that your customers need solving. Understanding that, why are we building this new? And then as defects or things come into the legacy, is evaluating them based on, is this something that we need to prioritize getting added to the new? And if you can, then being able to bring those customers along and invite them along with you can then not only generate that relationship, but also get them at the top where you get that constant user feedback on as you're iterating on this new thing. Sometimes those can be hard to find, right? They're a little bit suspect to change, but maybe being able to say, hey, we can turn it on for just this small group. I've done that where, using feature flags and things where it's like, we don't want to disrupt your whole department. They need to keep doing things the way they've been doing them. But hey, we'd love to get you involved in this like small group conversation and give you access to this new thing as we're going along. But I think really building those customer relationships to help ensure that they aren't as afraid of change, right? Sort of put those fears aside, and then really understanding, why are they wanting to stay with the legacy? And are you addressing those problems with your new version? Can you prioritize the topmost first to address those? Certainly with anything new, there's the foundational stuff you have to do first, and that takes time. But is there any way you can do that as quickly as possible so that you could start putting things in it that those customers need, especially when they start, certainly when any defect or any maintenance item comes up, you want to say, what is the impact of that? Do I really, it may be a large, loud customer, but how much impact is it really having? And sometimes those are hard conversations, but maybe out of them you say, this isn't something, we're going to be doing here, but hey, you've helped us understand we need to prioritize it for the new thing. Would you like to be in that conversation?
Yep. Absolutely. And, one of the factors that I always like to take into consideration, and I intentionally posed the question in a very broad way, because there were literally, I think, I had about 5 or 6 different questions on this topic from different people. So I kind of went a little broad with it. But one of the things that I always try to keep in mind is who are the new capabilities, the next gen stuff that we're working on. Who is that meant for? And is it the same audience? Is it the same target audience or target market as the existing product that you're working on, that you're trying to create balance with? Or are you making a migration and an evolution as a company? Is that part of the change that's going on here? Are we really starting to target a new market? For example, are we going up market from where we were? Previously we served small enterprises and decided to go up market. And so that's going to weigh into your prioritization discussion as well as to how you create that balance, because delivering value to retain existing business while you're moving into a new market or a new segment is a very complex part of that balancing act as well, and making sure that you're serving the old market for as long as you need to fund the new market. Aaron, you got your hand up for a minute. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I don't know if this is going back too far in the conversation, Jason, so please let me know. But when we're talking about the difference between kind of new product development and maintaining the old system, I've worked for a couple of companies that have actually split these two things out at the enterprise portfolio planning level. It was a little bit tricky, but it forced a couple of things. It forced people to say, well, now you have to think about strategy, because how many of us have teams that say, well, all I have time to do is write user stories and work with the agile teams and, you know, deliver a product, and I can't do strategy. Well, if you're focused to work on the new product development, then the only thing you're working on is strategy, right? And then hopefully you have some product owners or VAs that can help you write the stories. But when you do this at the enterprise level, you even budget differently. How much money do you want to put towards sustaining that old 13-year-old behind the firewall on-premise product? And how much energy and organizational resources do you want to devote to new product development? It did add process and time to the budgeting cycle, which we all know is already painful enough. But in my opinion, it was really well worth it, because the GMs, the people, you know, on the leadership team said, listen, if you have $1 million to spend in your engineering team, 60% of it must be spent on new product development. It really helps you plan your team and understand who's working on what and when. And then there was one last thing I wanted to say, and someone mentioned, well, who's going to want to work on the old stuff? There's a couple of ways that we dealt with that, because a lot of the engineers were like, no, I'm not working on that. I want to work on the new shiny new stuff, and I want to put that on my resume. We've outsourced sustaining activities before. It is a little bit cheaper. You do get a little bit more for your dollar when you do stuff like that. But then there's also people who are in love with the old stuff. I know that we all know this. They're in love. They don't want to let it go. It's their baby. They've been at the company for 10 years. They wrote the first line of code, right? And they want to see it to the bitter end. And if you can find those people, they'll lead those teams and they'll do it with a smile. So I hope that wasn't going too far back in the conversation, but I've seen it. I've been a part of it. Yes, it's a little more process intensive, but it really helps the organization and your team focus.
I don't think it goes too far back at all, because it really comes back around to that planning concept. And I saw there was some additional commentary in the chat from Andy as well about making sure that you're really thinking forward and being very intentional about all those choices and the planning at the enterprise level to ensure that you're managing all those trade-offs.
And I would say, it kind of in addition, and to maybe supplement the point that Aaron was making, is that sometimes it's not all about, you know, how much resources do you want to sink into maintaining a legacy product that's behind the firewall. Everything, this 13-year-old system is completely obsolete for anyone but those particular users. But I think it also depends on what the product does and what industry your target market is working in, because there can be real security concerns around obsolete operating systems, old software, whatever it was built in, those sorts of things that could open the customer up to vulnerabilities.
Yep. Matt Bettina, you're up next.
All right. So I was going to add to this because this is the world that I have been living in for the last 3 years plus.
Great.
So I fully agree. There's a lot of challenges here around team, around fear of change from customers, legacy versus new, also balancing implementations of the existing product that's bringing in money, new customers coming on board. They still want to sell the product that's making money, and yet it has its challenges. What are you going to do? What kind of alignment do you need from leadership and the rest of your team? The user community, user testing cohorts, a roadmap beyond the first release, go-to-market strategy, customers, and communicating that plan to them. Those are all the things that I've been engaged in, and especially the last set of those right now. I think when it comes to team is it's almost like you need to start some conversations with folks. Get your UX people engaged if you have the ability to do so. Maybe even just open up a conversation to see if they can participate in this effort with you. They're going to be a major advocate and major help in this effort. Get your dev leads engaged, your architect. You're going to need them for the viability discussions, and identify the appropriate level of leadership to engage in a conversation at this time. You don't want to have siloed conversations, of course, but you also want to be mindful of just leaving things open-ended as well. The team thing has also been largely it wasn't the right timing, at least in my circumstances. Once some changes had taken place, some folks had moved out, and a few other things were shifted around. I would say like all the pieces have aligned now, and we've managed to get a pretty well-oiled machine going. But I think you need to understand what your team's strengths are and leverage those strengths. I've got a product manager who doesn't really write user stories, but he's a great strategist, great thinker. And I leverage that in the customer interviews that we do and lean on him for his industry expertise and being able to provide that direction on where he feels we may need to go. When it comes to fear of change, I think setting up a user community, and once you've kind of got this organized, once you've got a sense of what it is that you're doing, that can help to allay those fears with your customers, especially if you're able to preview some of the work that you're doing, which is exactly what we're doing right now. I think that's helping to build confidence in the customer base. Especially if there are some misses on communication as there's transitions with folks and changes in the teams over time. But I think it starts early on with an alignment conversation with the various different folks, especially leadership, on what it is that you're actually setting out to do. Like you said, Jason, who is this next gen meant for? And for us, it was you have this sort of like, wow, we can do this, we can do that, we can do this, we can do that. But you've got to rein it in sometimes to let's just get our existing customers to a better place to start with first and build upon it from there. We just want to get to a better place. Our target is to finish by the end of this year, so we're going to need to rein things in. And as long as everybody can agree on what that better place looks like, it's achievable. When you start adding scope and you start adding ideas and new things and stuff, it blows out of proportion, and now you can no longer deliver against your commitment. So being realistic about what you can do and how you're going to achieve that, I think is really important, and having everybody lasered in on that, aligned on that. That's where I probably spent the majority of my time, was obtaining that alignment, because without it, you're not moving forward. You're going to go in circles. You're going to go in all kinds of directions until you have everybody from the whoever it is, president, CEO, whomever at the top, all the way down.
Yep. And I saw that Rob.
The major win.
Yep. Saw Rob dropped in the chat there as well, an agreement on plus oneing your comments on user testing. Product managers are expert users, reminding us don't make assumptions without validating. So I think you hit a lot of really important points there, Matt, that obviously come from a strong position of knowledge and experience. So very well said.
Yeah, and look at with respect to Rob's comment, maybe partner with your UX team, or at least take a look across the board at your customer base and identify what some of those user testing cohorts might look like. Smaller groups tend to be a good thing. You want to get enough feedback, but you also want to keep the discussion productive and not just have too many people, involved in things right away. So you can start small with smaller cohorts, and then you can always build it up from there if you need to.
Yep, very true. Very true. Thank you. Robert Kinsman, you've been patiently waiting.
Thanks. I'm listening to all of this, and I'm getting twitches and PTSD from it all. And spot on in all those comments. One thing that I would add to it is this the customer and the sales side of it. I watched an experience where a product manager goes around, talks to everybody, and talks senior management, their direct reports, development, the whole shebang, green space or existing customers. They say green space, green space, green space. So we're going to build a new product for the enterprise as opposed to the mid-market, green space. So all the limitations that we had to deal with past are gone. We can build something big, bright, and shiny and new. And she drove this team and built this product. And they went to, they started showing it to customers, and the reaction was just absolutely horrific. They were involved with some customers who were helping them out, validating their ideas and everything else. That was good. But the existing customer basically, but how do I get from here to there, right? That wasn't clear to them. And the other thing that was, especially when you have support dollars, right? When you're relying on support dollars, the people are going, so let me get this clear. For the last 5 years, I've been all the support money, been screaming for this particular feature, and I don't get it. But you took all that support money and put it on a bright shiny thing over here, right? So it just actually was a horrific crunch when it was launched and everything else. And they scrambled to sort of, well, we'll add some features to get the existing customers to the new space. But it caused a really negative reaction to the broader user base. The customers who saw the stuff said, this is fantastic. But the existing customers are going, what are you doing? What's in it for me? And I guess the other point I'll make too quickly is I've also seen where the bright shiny thing was put out in the field too soon in terms of like it's coming. And so the sales rep would go, I got a bright shiny thing coming, and that's coming out next month. I know that. Actually, fact is a year away, but whatever. And I got my existing product. Let's sell a bright shiny thing. And of course, there's no bright shiny thing, so sales stall. So just be aware of that type of aspect in terms of your core base, as well as don't get the sales reps too excited too soon.
Yeah. And that kind of ties into something Diane said a minute ago, and I'm kind of going back and connecting that. It's also, she talked about identifying very specific customers, and I expand on that is when you think about your new capabilities, your new development, not only even if it's a subset of your existing customers that you're targeting first in this transition, make sure that you're being really clear on how for this subset of customers, you're going to meaningfully solve something that hasn't been solved before, or address an opportunity in a way that is so much better than how it's being addressed for them today, that it becomes a major focus for them. And to Diane's point, they become real advocates in helping you knock down the next line of defense. In a lot of cases, and this also goes back to the planning that Aaron talked about, it's not necessary. You can't replace functionality for 70% of or 80% of your customers if you've got a lot of customers. And it may not be necessary to do so. So being really clear about how you're building a foundation to solve new problems in new ways for your most important customers early on can help manage that balance and prioritization so that you're creating momentum and excitement with the new development work while you're still providing some service on the legacy platform and trying to create that customer balance. So let's see here. So I don't see any more hands up. Anybody have any final thoughts on that topic of kind of balancing the old and the new? So something that's really closely tied to that is we had a few people asking about roadmap and communicating these evolutions and your roadmap in general throughout the company. And one person said, how do you balance the needs of your current customers with the needs of potential future customers when creating your product roadmap? We also had somebody said, what are some of the best practices for creating a product strategy that aligns with the company's overall business strategy? How do you prioritize features on your product roadmap when you have limited resources? And what are some effective ways to communicate your product strategy and roadmap to stakeholders? And I think one of the most meaningful, as I look at those questions and we think about this transition from a legacy platform to, or the balancing legacy maintaining a legacy platform with next generation or new development, roadmap becomes a really important conversation. And we've only got a few minutes left, but I wonder if anybody has had an approach to communicating that message broadly about the path from where we are today to where we're going to be tomorrow in this type of an environment. I know, I wonder, Greg, Andy, you may have something on that. Anybody, and I know, Diane, that you've had to do this. So let's talk a little bit about communicating to the larger market and getting that roadmap both for internal stakeholders and external stakeholders.
I know one thing that was helpful, though, sometimes you get pushback, is trying to do the now, next, or later, not trying to box yourself in to this quarter or that quarter, and then helping people understand why you're doing it that way, right? Because we're still discovering, or we're still gathering information, and I want to set expectations accordingly. And then just the fact of, making sure it's not just a feature list, right? We transitioned that together, and it is really understanding it from the user's point of view. We're going to enable this capability for our users, or that, or help them with this or that. Because if it's just a list of features, then people hang their hat on this feature without understanding what it's actually providing to the users and to the company, its value to the company. And I think that helps people understand. And if you have it that way, and then when it takes longer, your chances, which inevitably things do sometimes, right? Your chances of being able to help them understand why it's taking longer is that you're trying to satisfy this problem that we're trying to solve, the outcome that we're trying to reach, and that value that we talked about. Hey, in order to really get that value we talked about a month ago, we're finding some other things thanks to all of your input, right? It's like turn to say, hey, we've gotten great input from everybody, and we discovered this, so we want to change our direction or pivot over here so that we can really realize that value that we proposed a month ago.
Yep. And I love how you said that, and really focusing your roadmap on the outcomes that you're delivering. It gives you a lot more flexibility, but it also helps to make that clear connection between the work that you're doing and get you out of the feature discussion and delivery date discussion and into the how are we helping you discussion. What are we helping you? What's improving about your business because you're doing business with us, or what's improving about your life because you're buying a product from me.
Right.
That's great. Aaron.
I think before you get there, though, you have to know what their life is like. And one of the things that I often do with my teams is in their MBOs, or in their whatever you call them, OKRs, or the way that defines if they get paid, their bonus, is how many customer visits are they actually making? To force them out either into the field or into Zoom meetings, it's a little bit more tricky in today's world because many of our customers don't exist in an office space anymore. But watching them through contextual inquiry research, right? Understanding what they're doing, understanding what their pain points are, understanding what their bosses expect from them. So that when you ask that question that someone just said, what is it like when you do business with us? How are we helping you solve your problems? You have to have those answers first, right? And, too often we think that we know what our customers need. And someone in the chat said products is not a good UX designer. We are also not good product managers, right? Unless you know what your customers need. I think, what did they say in pragmatic training? Everybody has an opinion, but your opinion isn't valid. I just don't care. Show me the data behind your roadmaps. How many customers did you visit? How many pain points did you tally and see, that there's some commonalities between those customers? And I actually put all of those things into my team's MBOs for the end of the year. Well, for each quarter, of course. And it helps us get there.
Yeah, Becca had to drop early, but that's definitely a huge part of of the validation and of the data question when you're looking at structured versus unstructured data. There's so many different ways to think about. There's what your product doing, but there's also what your customer's doing, and what information do I have out there that I can use to quantify the decisions that I'm making. So that brings us, yes, yeah, Robert, your opinion, although interesting, is irrelevant. That's the quote you were going for, Aaron. Yes, absolutely.
That's the one.
Yes, however interesting are relevant.
Yep. There's another one that Pragmatic is quite well known for propagating ruthlessly as well, is nothing important happens in the office, Nihito.
We don't do our job, somebody else will. I
Yep.
hung them up after I hung them up on my wall.
Love it. Love it. That's awesome. Well, that brings us to the top of the hour. And, as always, these are always fun sessions. It gives you a chance, it gives us all a chance to get to know each other and have some really kind of meaty discussions about what we do, without somebody kind of just teaching. We're learning from each other. So I'm really thankful that all of you were able to join us today. We will be back next week at our early time slot, and looking forward to seeing you all back here. And we'll have our next kind of phase of product coffee sessions announcing. For those of you who were here last week, I think it was last week. Yes, I was on vacation with Elisa. We have been putting together a great series based on her talk, or her book, and her methodology for eliminating risk with the profitable method. And we're going to be actually going through offering a series of workshops over the next several months to help everyone go really deep into this methodology in a way that is, frankly, is a precursor to a major offering that Elisa's got coming out next year. So being here on Product Coffee is going to give you some great insight and access to some emerging thought leadership and approaches to new product development and product management that are being published and demonstrated in a whole new way right here through Product Coffee. So stick around. Make sure you're signed up on our mailing list if you aren't already. Those workshops will be available to all of our Product Coffee Premium members as well at no additional charge. So if you haven't already joined, please jump over to productcoffee.com/premium and join us on the premium side as well. Continue to support this community and be a part of it. Thank you everyone for being here today, and we will see you next week. Have a great week.